Zohar, can you please share with us what made you to decide to dedicate your book to John Caputo and to his theology?
When I started, when I encountered the works of John Caputo, I think the first work was his book titled The Weakness of God. I was very impressed by the way he treats theology, something that as an Israeli scholar, in Israel it's unheard. His considerations or reconsiderations of the very known, familiar religious categories, like the omnipotence of God, for example.
Can you explain us what does it
the
mean?
morality of the Bible, as we know it, and the way he challenged this, and ultimately put its head down, upside down. And I was impressed by that, and I was drawn more and more to read his other or peripheral works. And I finally decided that okay, I'm going to write about it. I didn't know in the first place that I'm going to write a book, but I wrote about John Caputo. Of course, I had to do a lot of reading, peripheral reading about regard to his influences, like Heidegger.
So Zohar, can you share with us a little bit more about what is fascinated about the theology of John Caputo? Let's take one example. Let's take one example and walk us, the listeners, into the uniqueness of this theology.
Okay, John Caputo is a representative, a prominent representative of a branch of something that is since the 80s. It's called postmodern theology. And postmodern theology is a school of philosophers of religion that were under the inspiration of Heidegger's early occupation with Christian theology. They took Heidegger as a point of departure into their new thoughts about religion, that basically they are called postmodern theology. It's called postmodern theology because they are interpreting, or they interpreted the known theology through continental philosophy of the second half of the 20th century.
Can you go to
people
more
like
specific?
Caputo?
Can you go
people
to more
like
specific?
Caputo,
Yeah.
theologians like Caputo, philosophers like Caputo, like Jean-Luc Marion, Catherine Keller, Charles Winquist, and more. Now, people speak about few branches of postmodern theology. Caputo, specifically, is a representative of a so-called weak theology, and that is actually, in fact, that it's his contribution to what I just now defined as postmodern theology. And as I said, these philosophers, postmodern theologians, philosophers of religion, they interpreted the theology in light of post-Heideggerian or post-structural continental philosophy of the second half of the 20th century, including phenomenology, post-structuralism, and deconstruction. So specifically, Caputo is strongly influenced by the deconstructive thought of Jacques Derrida. And what is special about it is that Jacques Derrida, I start from the end, from the climax. Jacques Derrida, one of the things that he was interested in, well, he spoke about conditional and unconditional in categories like forgiveness, hospitality. Now, what is conditional? I'm speaking now about Derrida. Conditional is in hospitality, for example. Conditional is that you invite me to Shabbat, over. So, okay, I know that I'm subject to a certain framework. I will think about bringing you a wine or flowers. Predictable, things are in frame and framed. Unconditional is, for example, in conditional hospitality, even if you tell me when I get into your house, feel at home, Zohar, feel at home, feel yourself comfortable at home. I know that you don't really mean it. I'm not going to open your refrigerator to grab me more food. Unconditional is a consciousness, is a conscience where I'm already invited, and you don't have to tell me. Once you tell me, you enframe it. And Derrida was speculating, or he made considerations. He was interested in the question whether hospitality, this religious category that we know from the Bible, so well from the Bible, Abraham stories, and so on, can be applied to politics or not. What does it mean? Conditional hospitality in contemporary, let's take a burning issue, like a pressing issue like immigration. Everybody speak about it. Europe, in North America. Conditional hospitality would be that I invite you, you come, you're a citizen from some third world country, and I invite you to immigrate to my country in condition that you will study the local language, the customs, you need a visa. Unconditional would be that all the obstacles of nationalism are low down. Like, feel yourself at home. And Derrida was speculating on this transition or application of the biblical meaning of hospitality, in unconditional hospitality, into politics. And Caputo, following Derrida, that's the place where Jesus of Caputo's interpretation of Jesus, as I explain at length in my book, meets Derrida's hospitality, meets Derrida, while John Caputo wants to interpret Jesus' doctrine of forgiveness and Jesus' doctrine of hospitality, as is manifested in the famous banquet scene. I think it's Matthew chapter 22, where Jesus telling the parable about a guy that at his wedding his friends and relatives didn't show up, so they didn't show up. So he told his servant, just go to the street and call anybody that you encounter. This attitude, which is impossible. I mean, a guest in a wedding has to know at least the name of the groom. So this crazy attitude is Caputo's interpretation of the Bible, of Jesus, with Derridean intuitions. Caputo is making an experiment in theology, applying these Derridean methods that just I explained.
So the project of John Caputo is to take ideas who come from, let's say, from Derrida or from postmodern philosophy, and to translate it into Christian theology, and in that way, in the postmodern way.
Yes, he's not alone, but
of course, but this is his project.
Yes, that is basically what he's doing. You know, is what I just explained. The way he appropriated Derridean ideas into theology. Another example would be Derrida is also he had a special perception of the morals principle of the Bible, or moral experience at all, as a weak force. Yes, Derrida again speculated or asked the question whether a God without sovereignty, a God without an army, think about a God or a king as an army, as police. Derrida asked the question, can we think about a God, king, it's a metaphor, a God, without army, a powerless God? And Caputo took this idea, bound it with a biblical idea, namely of Paul's idea in 1 Corinthians, a little bit in 2 Corinthians, known as the Logos of the Cross, where Paul speaks about the weakness of God, of Jesus. Actually, we're speaking about a loser here. When he was brought or grabbed to the cross, everybody knew, and humiliated by the Roman soldiers, everyone knew who is in power. And Paul want to communicate in this passage there, called Logos of the Cross, that God is actually stands on the side of the losers, of the outsiders, of the everyone, all those we don't want to think that they belong to society, you know, like beggars and sick. So God's on their side. So Caputo bind these two ideas, this postmodern idea of Derrida of God without sovereignty. God is a call, is a demand, is a claim. He doesn't have a substance. And here you can hear the echoes, the Heideggerian influence of Caputo, like Heidegger, of course, is well known, was rejecting metaphysics, like 2,500 years project that he considers as total vanity. So Caputo, following Derrida, following Heidegger, is removing God, God, the omnipotent God, the hero of the Bible, from the plane of being. Same thing that was done by Jean-Luc Mariot that I mentioned earlier in his book, God Without Being. So that was, and Caputo is actually criticizing it. This is like a leitmotif that goes all the way, all through his works. This constant critique of the, I would call it, the obsession of orthodoxy, mainstream religion, or traditional religion, theology, with the power of God, which is a disaster. All history is like a heap of disasters caused by this modelizing, like all human institutions, racism,